Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
This episode of the Gegenpressing podcast is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline continues to be your number one source for all your basketball wagering needs, including pro and college hoops throughout the year. With up-to-the-minute odds, stats, and trends, you can follow your favorite team's path to the playoffs with in-game live betting, contests, and all the best player props. Experience the world's best wagering platform anytime from your desktop or your mobile devices. Head to BetOnline today to become part of the team, and remember to use the promo code BELIEVE, that is BLEAV, BELIEVE, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here. Hello and welcome to Gegenpressing, the Bundesliga podcast. I'm Manu, he's Stefan Bienkowski, and first of all, Stefan, how's it going? How's your Monday? I know it's been a busy one at Transfermarkt, but we are not here to talk about work. We are here to talk about the Bundesliga, which is much better than talking about work, I think. So, how's it going?
Yeah, a nice respite from a busy Monday. No, it's a great weekend of football, a lot of entertainment, a lot of excitement. Yeah, and a lot of kind of German football to talk about, actually. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It should be fun.
Also, I need to mention, and if you haven't gotten involved in the chat yet on Substack, this is episode 399, Stefan.
At least that's what we think.
I'm pretty sure that's correct.
Yeah, the software we used to upload the podcasts say it's episode 399. Maybe some got lost. Maybe there's like an old chronicle of previously. It's like the old Bob Dylan tapes that haven't been published. Like there's maybe old Gegenpressing episodes that have gone missing. But yes, we think this is episode 399. So we will have episode 400, and yeah, it's technically a bonus episode, but we're going to put it out for everyone to kind of celebrate, and it'll be out this week.
And if you have questions and you want to ask us questions, you can do so on the Substack, in the Substack chat. So head over there. If you have signed up, you can ask us whatever you want. I think that's pretty much it. We can choose, of course, whether we're going to answer the question.
Yeah, we've already had a flurry of questions, some really interesting ones, some really fun ones, some ones that might get us cancelled, to be perfectly honest, so I might have to avoid them. But that's just the nature of the internet, it would seem. So we'll do our best to avoid the rubbish ones.
We don't want to get cancelled after 400 successful episodes. And also, of course, and I'm going to do that again when I get to the show, and I've already texted them today. Chris Williams, of course, and Bryce Dunn, the original co-founders of this podcast, all the way back in November 2017, both have texted me today and said, congratulations, Stefan. And I said, well, this wouldn't have been possible without those two. Chris, of
Absolutely.
course, you were still around when Chris was still on the podcast, right? So
I remember Bryce as well, of course. I did some shows with Bryce.
Totally, right? So it's been, there's a lot of people that have been involved in the show, and we're grateful to all of them, and because it wouldn't be where it is now. Anyways, enough about that, dwelling in the past. There will be lots of that, I guess, in episode 400. Let's talk about the football that we saw this weekend. Stuttgart, let's start with them. Do keep chasing Bayern Munich, and we have to kind of say it that way because Leverkusen keep doing Leverkusen things, and are still far and ahead in the Bundesliga table, despite anything that Bayern Munich are doing. But Stuttgart just 4 points behind Bayern Munich still, 2 bad results, and they could go second. Also slowly but surely inching towards that Champions League spot. They had some great news on top of their 2-0 win over Union Berlin last week with Sebastian Hoeneß renewing his contract, right? That ends speculations about his future. And I think at a time where you really want to put an end to those speculations, because with Bayern Munich waking up to reality and realizing that maybe just poaching Xabi Alonso from Leverkusen isn't going to be quite as easy as they thought, they were, of course, looking at other candidates, and Sebastian Hoeneß was one of them. He's taking himself off the market, setting a really good sign here. I also want to call about the 4 potential call-ups to the German national team, which I think is well-deserved. But let's start with Sebastian Hoeneß here. First a new contract, then a win over Union Berlin. It's been a pretty perfect week for Stuttgart.
It's been an incredible week for Stuttgart. It's been an incredible season for Stuttgart. And I was actually, just as you were talking there, I had a quick thought in my head to see if Stuttgart are actually on course to beat their record points tally in the Bundesliga. And you'd have to go all the way back to the 2006-2007 season when they obviously won the league. They won that with 70 points, and they're currently sitting on 53 points. So you'd have to take 18 points from the last 9 games. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, so 20 points from the next 9 games, which means they can only drop another 7, which, to be perfectly honest with you, they've still got to play Leverkusen, they've still got to play Bayern, they've still got to play Dortmund, but, you know, you never know. And it would be quite remarkable, and I think it'd be a perfect example of just how good the Stuttgart side have been, that if they were to actually finish with more points than the season they won the title, it would really show just the kind of absolutely incredible kind of record-breaking form that they've been showing. And yeah, they've been incredible. You know, we've spent all season kind of singing their praises, and I've just been so impressed with the way that Hoeneß has kind of built a team that, if I'm being honest, and I wrote about this not that long ago actually, in terms of how, if you actually look at the way the Stuttgart play their football, they're not entirely dissimilar to the way that Leverkusen play football. They like to play possession football. They like to take their time. They like to be quite intricate with their passing. They rely a lot on kind of getting into the final third, dominating the space, and then using their best players to do that. And boy, did we see that at the weekend with, obviously, you know, Guirassy scored a fantastic goal, and then Fulrig scoring an outstanding goal. You know, for anyone who missed it, it was like a right-footed Arjen Robben, to be honest with you, the way he kind of cut inside and just curled it in the back post. And, you know, we talk a lot about how, you know, well, we're now kind of talking and joking about how they might be able to now catch Bayern, but I keep looking at league table and thinking, what Stuttgart have really done is they've set the standard and they set a bar so high for both Leipzig and Borussia Dortmund. You know, for the last kind of I guess for the best part of 11 years now, we've been watching Dortmund really kind of struggle to establish themselves first as Germany's second best team and then as a potential title challenger for Bayern. And, you know, people like you and I, and I'm sure lots of people who listen to this podcast, whenever someone from England or Spain or Italy says, you know, Bayern dominate the Bundesliga because they buy all the best players and they have the best team and things like that. And more often than not, we're left saying, well, actually, more often than not, it's actually Dortmund who are tripping up over their own feet. And Leverkusen have obviously made that abundantly clear what happens when you get your ducks in a row in the Bundesliga. But perhaps to a slightly less extent, I think Stuttgart have as well because, you know, score more goals. From an attacking sense, I think they're more impressive as well. Defensively, I think they're more impressive as well. But they're also playing a different style of football from what Leipzig and Dortmund are playing. And I just think they've completely leapfrogged both of those clubs. And I think both Leipzig and Dortmund were probably looking at everything Stuttgart have done, both on and off the pitch, and wondering how they can emulate that next season because Stuttgart have made a fool of both those teams. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah, I just went through Hoeneß's managerial history and tried to find a parallel to Pep Guardiola, and of course I didn't because although he has been at Bayern Munich for a long time, right, as a youth coach, he wasn't actually there when Pep was there. It was afterwards. What I actually thought was really interesting, I didn't, maybe it was in the back of my head, but he was actually head of youth and a U17 coach at RB Leipzig when Rangnick was there, which is of course interesting, right? Because
everything comes back to Rangnick.
Everything comes back. It does. It is actually kind of eerie. I mean, he is the godfather of the back four in German football, right? Before Rangnick, the German football played with a libero, and then of course Rangnick changed that at Ulm and then later at Stuttgart. Before, of course, he built Hoffenheim and Leipzig to be what they are today. And then he was at Bayern Munich, and that was actually during the time when Niko Kovac was already in charge, so I can't really draw parallels there. It's interesting nonetheless because I don't actually, you know why I was maybe surprised with the Leipzig thing is because I don't actually think he's playing typical Leipzig football.
Yeah, I wouldn't say they're playing typical Leipzig football at all, by any means. you'd obviously have to ask him, and even then he probably wouldn't admit as much, but I do kind of wonder if maybe he's just taking a look at what Leverkusen are doing and thought, well, we can do that, we can apply that to our system. I think there's also just a simple aspect that when you start to dominate games the way that Stuttgart have, your football does eventually kind of begin to transform more into possession based, simply because you have the ball more often. I've actually got the stats in front of me, and Dortmund and Leipzig, Dortmund and Leipzig do a lot more counterattacks per game than Stuttgart. Now that could be because of the way they play, or simply because they lose the ball more often than Stuttgart, or they get teams attack them a lot more than Stuttgart. And you could also say the same that Dortmund obviously do a lot more pressing, they make a lot more tackles and things like that as well. So, it's obviously up for debate, but I think, we'll move on to talk about Dortmund at one point or later on in this podcast, but there'll be plenty of Dortmund fans who'll tell you that, first and foremost, their team do struggle to control games, and I think that's the biggest difference between them and Stuttgart, and that goes all the way back to these players who've obviously had an outstanding season and had an outstanding... to the point that they're getting called up for like the German national team, for example. We were actually talking about before we came on air there that the one player who's perhaps been just as impressive as anyone in Stuttgart is the one player who hasn't yet been confirmed as in Nagelsmann's squad, which is obviously Angelo Stiller, who's been a bit of a revelation in that kind of Stuttgart midfield this season. But yeah, you can kind of go through that entire team man for man, and they've all more or less improved remarkably under Hoeneß. So whether it's tactics, whether it's individual players stepping up, whether it's Stuttgart simply dominating teams, the proof's in the pudding, whichever way you look at it, to be honest with you. And I think, Hoeneß has just done a great job, and he's been rewarded with a new contract, which I guess, Manu, means that, at least for now, it kind of pours some cold water over those rumours linking him with a return to Munich.
Yeah, that's not happening anytime soon. I actually... spent some time thinking about it this weekend, that this is actually in many ways a really remarkable Bundesliga season, because I think we're in one of those watershed turning point times, that could really define a new era in the way German football is headed. That I think that could actually also impact the national team, and possibly positively, but I'll get to that in a moment. There is two teams in German football that play very different football than most German teams have in the past, and they're having enormous success with it. Stuttgart is one, Leverkusen is the other, of course. And I don't think we've seen that since Jürgen Klopp with Dortmund. That, of course, then ushered in this era that is now ending. I actually think we're getting to the end of an era here. Which is possibly a good thing, because it might also usher in a new era that could also be positively impacting the German national team. Because I think the way certain teams are playing now is changing, and you see more and more teams copying what Stuttgart and Leverkusen have been doing. A good example is Freiburg's 2-2 draw against Bayern. Another good example is actually Bochum's victory over Bayern, that more teams are trying to find footballing solutions even against the very best teams, and they're having success with it, right? And I think that is very much due to Alonso and Hoeneß showing it that it's possible over a long time. And I am actually really curious to see how other coaches are going to copy that. And then, of course, we get to now Julian Nagelsmann and calling up. These are not confirmed, maybe I'll shed some light on this. This is how it works in German football. And a lot of national teams actually do this. The players will have been called up, and then the agents go on speed dial to their preferred journalists and basically tell them, oh yeah, guess what? My agent XYZ was called up. So that's why it's not confirmed, but you can basically look at the names that have been leaked and say, yeah, that's pretty sure. Things change because of injuries. Maybe someone has to, there's last minute updates, etc. I think it's interesting that let's go to the players that were called up. Waldemar Adenton, right? He's a little bit of a surprise to me, although that probably means Schlotterbeck isn't in it, which is well-deserved. Undav, that's an open secret. We all know Undav was going to be called up. He has been, in many ways, one of Germany's best strikers in the Bundesliga. Führich, again, he's been part of the national team already. You compared him to Robben, his form has been absolutely stellar. And then the fourth is Mittelstadt. and that makes sense because that's a wingback solution that Germany needs. Although I think, Kimmich is, of course, occupying one of those two positions. The one that's not been named yet, doesn't mean he's not in it, is Angelo Stiller, Stefan, I wrote about Stiller earlier this year and his importance for this team and how he has basically made Endo a forgotten man in Stuttgart. That doesn't mean Endo's not a good player. If you're a Liverpool fan, I totally appreciate he is. It's just that they brought in Stiller and he's doing the job just as well. That's a name that kind of stood out as not being called up. But although, if you're calling up Tony Kroos, where are you putting Angelo Stiller?
Yeah, I think it's actually a good example, or good reflection rather, of where Bayern do and don't have strength. Not Bayern, Germany do or don't have strength. Obviously, Anton's getting called up because Nagelsmann's still kind of desperately looking for a solid defensive pairing. As you said, Schlotterbeck actually more or less confirmed he's not in the squad at a press conference today, actually. And he was a little mystified by that because he thinks he's been consistent. Be interesting to see what Dortmund fans think of that. I'm not sure they'd agree. As you said, Mittelstadt's obviously in there as a left back because Bayern do have left back. Don't know why I keep saying Bayern. Germany do have left back issues. Bayern have left back issues too. But
the two used to be synonymous, not anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
But they used to be synonymous.
Exactly. I mean, obviously, Germany do have left backs. David Rams is a good example, but I don't think that's nailed on. And Fulrich as well as a left winger is a good shout as well because they just need more options really in attacking. I think someone like Chris Fulrich's simply been too good to avoid, to be perfectly honest with you, in that regard. So,
and that's his third call up in a row too.
Yeah, I mean, you could make the same case for Alexander Nubel, of course, for apparently not being in the squad simply because Germany do have goalkeepers as well. So it's a good example of how Nagelsmann's maybe kind of using the Stuttgart squad. He's kind of picking and choosing the players he wants from it to fill in the gaps in his squad. And yeah, it'd be very hard pressed to kind of say no one really deserves that. I think particularly Anton's been a really underrated, or he's kind of really flown under the radar. Even in Stuttgart, I'm sure Stuttgart fans appreciate him. But people will say who's been the best centre back in the Bundesliga this season. Probably find very few people to say Anton, and I think he certainly would be up there. His stats certainly suggest as much as well. So, they've all done tremendously well, and hopefully they get a shot to prove that with Germany.
Well, usually too, is like if as a centre back you are not in the headlines, that's kind of a good thing. You know what I mean? It sounds kind of weird, but like Schlotterbeck, I actually think Schlotterbeck is a fantastic football player. He has all the skills and talent in the world. He's an incredible football player. And pardon my French, but he's been a shit defender this year. Like the two things can exist at the same time. You can be a fantastic football player and actually still be terrible at what you've been doing. And I think that actually fits Schlotterbeck. It fits him so well. And I actually do think, we're seeing this with Jonathan Tah, who's playing an incredible season. Sometimes centre backs, especially the ones that can actually play football, take a long time to develop. Another good example is Jerome Boateng. How many years did we criticize Jerome Boateng until he won a World Cup for Germany in 2014, right? So that happens with centre backs. But Schlotterbeck saying that he thinks he's been consistent. I mean, he has been consistently bad.
Yeah, is this a good way to transition onto the Dortmund game, perhaps?
Yeah, in a mode, because I have one more theory on why Stiller isn't called up, and that's I think it's because Nagelsmann is calling up Pavlovic.
Yeah, possibly. I would also maybe just say that, look, Nagelsmann is only in the job for the summer. He's not here to bleed young players. He's not here to provide a nurturing nest for the stars of tomorrow. He's here to win this competition with the German national team. And if that means he's calling up, 27-year-old veteran, grizzled Bundesliga veteran Anton over the slick Schlotterbeck, then that's what he's going to do, because he's like, I need a guy who'll get stuck in and not someone who'll lose the ball 20 yards from his own box because he's trying to play a Hollywood pass. And I think that's a perfect example. And someone like Angelo Stiller, obviously has a bright future with the German national team, but the fact, I mean, you're right. Maybe it's because Pavlovic has been brought in because he's obviously been he's getting a lot of interest from, I think it's Croatia, his second nationality. Serbia, sorry, my apologies.
Yeah.
But there's obviously the fact that Gundogan will still be there, Toni Kroos will still be there. I'm trying my best not to turn this into a Germany national team podcast, to be perfectly honest with you. But I think Stiller doesn't have much to worry about. I'm sure he'll have plenty of game time for the German national team in the years to come.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is Toni Kroos' last tournament, and then their pathway for Stiller will be wide open. I have a really good transition to Borussia Dortmund for you, Stefan.
Before you do, actually, one more thing I want to say about Sebastian Hoeneß on the kind of new contract and the kind of Bayern rumours. If you actually look at the Stuttgart squad and the star players in it, the thing that's really outstanding to me, or really notable and outstanding from a Stuttgart point of view, is that just about all the key players are on long-term contracts. I've got it in front of me. I just want to talk about before we move on. Guirassy tied until 2026. Endo Milo 2028.
Although Guirassy has the exit clause.
Of course, he has an exit clause, of course, but we'll see about that. Hiroki Ito 2027. Furyk 2028. Undav, it's obviously a buy clause in his contract that they could sign him this summer. Angelo Stiller 2027, Anton 2027, Zagadou 2026, Silas 2026, on and on and on, Mittelstadt 2026. More or less, Hoeneß's top 10 players all have contracts that run 2, 3, 4 years into the future, and you really can't overstate how important it is for the Stuttgart side. This club has been like a merry-go-round or a carousel, whatever you want to call it, with players coming and going constantly over the course of the years. It's why they've been this yo-yo club. It's why they've gone up and down to the point that they've had kind of even like huge open fiascos with sporting directors of sport, blah, 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 even club presidents over the way that players have come and left. The fact that all these players are tied into long-term contracts, I think, was a huge factor in Hoeneß agreeing to stay at the club. It's not to say that some of them might move on, or the fact that Stuttgart might feel compelled to sell some of them. Of course, that's just the nature of football. But the fact that they can pick and choose who goes, and that's this team who've actually achieved already something remarkable this season will more or less be intact, I think is one of the main reasons that Hoeneß is staying put.
Yeah, I mean, there is some rumblings at Stuttgart in the e.V., which is the membership club, but when isn't there rumblings in the e.V. membership club? As long as the players are all signed to long-term contracts, I think that's good. Now, you think, if you reach the Champions League, even someone like Guirassy could be convinced to stay put. And I think that's quite interesting as well to see what happens with Stuttgart. I was going to say, maybe Julian Nagelsmann can explain to Schlotterbeck in person next season why he didn't call him up for the Euros. Wow. See what I did there?
Yeah. So, I mean, the way that Dortmund are playing right now, there's no doubt that Watzke might be picking up the phone. He might actually pick up the phone to himself. He might be, as the Dortmund CEO, phoning the DFL. What's his official role? DFB, sorry.
President, yeah.
Is he president? So do you think he actually phones like one phone in his office and another one rings and he's like, "Hello, Yogi. Can I speak to Yogi? We'd like permission to speak to your manager about becoming our head coach next summer." Yeah, it's bizarre. This Dortmund game was, again, look, I'm in two minds about this. They ground out a result. That I think we both predicted, actually, on the previous show. I think I said Dortmund would narrowly win this because Werder Bremen would attack them, and Werder Bremen would try to dominate this game. They would try to win this game, and it was really two moments of magic, moments of individual brilliance, which I think won the game for Dortmund. Obviously, Daniel Malin's remarkable kind of scissor kick or overhead kick, you want to call it, and then
really nice goal.
And then the kind of Jadon Sancho of old kind of stepped up, and I mean, it was a deflected goal, but either way, the fact that he went past the player and got the shot in was still hugely encouraging. But for huge chunks of that game, before both goals went in, really, I thought Werder Bremen had plenty of chances. they finished the game with a much higher XG. And that's not just to say because obviously Sabitzer got sent off just before half-time. That's not to say that they racked up that XG in the second half. They had a higher XG than Dortmund going into half-time when they were 2-0 down, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, they were. You know, I think Bremen could probably be really frustrated the fact that they didn't take anything from this game. But equally, it's a big result for Dortmund, especially in the race to kind of for that fourth place. And it just kind of keeps them tumbling along. You know, it's kind of what we've been seeing now for the best part of, 3 months now, where on the pitch they're doing just enough to kind of keep going, but week after week, fans just seem to be kind of shrugging their shoulders and thinking, well, there's absolutely nothing about these team performances that suggests that this team are moving forward under Edin Terzic.
Yeah, I think the result was probably the best thing about this game for Borussia Dortmund and the decision makers at the club. I mean, in fairness, it does look increasingly likely that the Bundesliga will have a fifth spot next year, right? So that might save his bacon in the end of the day, even if they do drop to fifth. But you can't beat Germany's...
Manu, sorry, just cut in there.
Yeah.
That surely can't be enough. I mean, surely...
That's Dortmund, what I was just going to say, yeah.
Dortmund getting in on a technicality surely doesn't excuse any of Terzic's performances.
Here's what I was going to say. You can't be the second biggest club in Germany and be satisfied with fifth place. You know, even if that gives you Champions League football, and as I said, it looks increasingly likely because of the results that we had last week. And I mean, if Freiburg knock out West Ham, that almost cements it. That's, you can't, like, finishing fifth is ridiculous. You know, I compare this with like the biggest club in German football, Bayern Munich. Like, if they get a hint of them dropping to third, Tuchel would have been gone, right? And I think the only thing that's keeping Tuchel alive, and we're going to talk about that in a moment, of course, is I actually have this really weird feeling about Bayern in the Champions League, and that I think that's rescuing his job until the end of the year. But, you know, like, of course, Terzic, they could knock out PSV, and then we have a completely different conversation, and who knows where you get in the quarterfinals, and you get a couple lucky results there, and then you're in the semi-final, and, you know, crazier things have happened. But, you know, it's just not very convincing, and it's not like that this team, after last year, you would have expected them to at least consolidate that, right? And everyone makes this big point about, oh yeah, they finished second, and they only really finished second because of goal differential, but it was also like a really historical low year for Bayern Munich. You know, like, we're not, what we have to remember here, Bayern Munich could still finish the season with 84 points, which in their history they only, I think, have done 4 times better, right? It's the same amount of points that Pep Guardiola teams got. And so, you know, and yet, you know, Leverkusen will go beat them. And I think we have to remember too that last year, you know, our normal standard Dortmund performance should have ended up with them in the title. Like, Bayern basically handed it to them in the silver platter. And they made a step back from that. And I think they made a significant step back from that. And it's not, okay, yes, you lost Jude Bellingham, that's fine. That is a really difficult player to replace, and I get it, that's hard. My issue is that we have so many other players that are playing so well below form, right? We just talked about Schlotterbeck jokingly, and you know how maybe the next Dortmund coach will give him a better idea of how to do certain things. He hasn't made a step forward. Adeyemi has looked good in recent weeks, but you know, like, even that, like, I hope for so much more with Karim Adeyemi and the promise that he showed at Salzburg, and it's just, I haven't seen it. And there's so many other players that I just feel are just not performing at their best, and that comes down to coaching, in my opinion. Right?
I could throw a few more at you, man, if you want. Mukuku, Bino Gittins, these guys are players who are kind of bit part players. Gio Reyna is obviously a big name as well, who's still in the books, but kind of got...
Oh man, what he's doing even worse at Nottingham.
Oh yeah, exactly. But like, he's only at Nottingham Forest because Terzic couldn't get anything out of him. Now, that's maybe not Terzic's fault because, Reina's had a very kind of dotted history, but you can look through that entire team and kind of question who's actually really performing there. Gregor Kobel's having a great season. You could probably say Füllkrug's doing exactly what was expected of him. Daniel Malin has his moments, but
he's so streaky. Malin
he's so streaky. He's so streaky. And like that, both those centre-backs, both German centre-backs, Niklas Süle and Nico Schlotterbeck, the pair of them have done very little to kind of really cover themselves in glory this season. And it's
there was a scene at that game where Süle just kind of stands around and he looks like he doesn't know what he's doing. And he's just kind of shakes his head. And I'm like, he looks 5 to 10 pounds heavier than he did at the start of the season. If you are a professional player in the year 2024, you need to just do more, especially if you're one of the best paid players at the club. I reported at the time when he signed. Sky actually reported today the salary structure at Dortmund, and they listed Süle at the 10 million that I reported at the time as well, right? If you earn 10 million euros a year at a club like Borussia Dortmund, which makes you one of, I think, the 3 or 4 best paid players at the club, behave like it. That means off the pitch as well, This episode of the Gegenpressing podcast is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline continues to be your number one source for all your basketball wagering needs, including pro and college hoops throughout the year. With up-to-the-minute odds, stats, and trends, you can follow your favorite team's path to the playoffs with in-game live betting, contests, and all the best player props. Experience the world's best wagering platform anytime from your desktop or your mobile devices. Head to BetOnline today to become part of the team, and remember to use the promo code BELIEVE, that is BLEAV, BELIEVE, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here.
I was reading an article in Kicker today. Actually, I think it was maybe a match report, and they did a whole section on how at one point Niklas Süle broke into a sprint which actually broke a few records, and it's that old cliche that he's actually one of the fastest players in the Bundesliga. And I think actually he and Schlotterbeck are both two of the quickest central defenders in the league, which is interesting. But I think it says a lot about their season that's really all anyone can talk about when they talk about these players. That they're quick, but they're usually having to sprint because they're having to make up for their poor passes or tackles or interceptions or wherever else. But yeah, to kind of bring it back to what you were saying earlier on, because I thought it was really interesting, there's no way that Dortmund don't look at what's happened this season and really probably have to act. And I think that's all because outside factors will probably force their hand. Now, we've talked a lot about Dortmund over the last kind of 2 years, and we've talked about Dortmund's last 10 years on this show a lot in terms of the kind of malaise they've gone in the post-Klopp era, our criticisms of, the club under Watzke in the sense that they maybe prioritise money over performances. And, I think there's probably a pretty strong argument to be made that Dortmund's business model has always just to ensure really that they're the second best team in Germany or thereabouts. The fascinating thing is that both Leverkusen and Stuttgart have stepped up and said, no, we're going to show you how this works. We're going to be better than you. We're going to make a fool of you, and we're going to take these Champions League spots from you, which obviously will scare Dortmund, and there's probably a bead of cold sweat going down Watzke's back at the thought of it. But he's obviously probably taking a look at that Leipzig side and thinking, we lost Bellingham, but they lost 3 Jude Bellinghams, at least, in Guardiol, in Kunku, and Szoboszlai. And they're more or less neck and neck with us. And if I had to bet on one of these two teams getting better next season under the current head coach, I'd put my money on Marco Rose and RB Leipzig, and what probably is man for man a better squad. So they've also got that pressure that they have to bear in mind. So what Dortmund are looking at right now is, 6 months ago, Watzke would have probably thought, yeah, Leverkusen are doing well, they'll tail off. Stuttgart are doing well, they'll tail off. Then it was, wow, Stuttgart and Leverkusen are doing really well, but it's fine because the head coaches will move on, someone will snap them up. But now we're talking about a situation where Alonso's probably going to stay at Leverkusen, Hoeneß is probably going to stay at Stuttgart, and there's probably a good chance that Leipzig are probably going to get better next season under Marco Rose. And all
especially
of a sudden,
if they keep Simmons, which
exactly
it seems increasingly likely.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about that. So you're very quickly looking at a situation where, on paper, Dortmund are the 5th best team in Germany next season, and that's maybe something that might force their hand in the summer.
What they got to do something, right? I mean, it's really interesting. I remember this conversation that we had with Sebastian Hoeneß at the airport in San Diego while we were waiting for our flight to Vegas, the preseason, and he listed off all these things that you just listed off.
You should probably contextualize that and say you were on a press event. You didn't just bump into him at LAX or something.
No. That was when I was no.
He wasn't on his holidays.
Obviously,
he wasn't going to Disneyland.
I was reporting for Gegenpressing in Transfermarkt, right? I was part of the preseason tour in the US, and they did the training camp in San Diego, and we were waiting collectively for our flights to Vegas, and we were going off a lot of these things that you mentioned, and when you were just talking here, you sounded exactly like Sebastian Hoeneß did at that moment at the airport in San Diego, and I was just thinking to myself, they knew. Like, internally, they must have known that these risks exist, right? And in fact, they openly talked about it. I mean, like, obviously, this conversation was off the record. I'm only mentioning it because he also then said it on the record, which in my books means it's a fact now, right? But they knew of the risks, and yet they didn't do anything.
Have you ever seen the movie Spotlight? It's about the Boston Globe uncovering the child molestation scandal. There's a scene in there where Mark Ruffalo breaks down and, he's shouting at his editor saying, they knew, they let it happen. That's exactly what you just sounded like. Not to compare Dortmund. I should make that perfectly clear. I'm absolutely not making that. I'm only comparing you to the dialogue. That's as far as the comparison goes. But
it's just like, I don't know. I had this moment when you were rattling all of these things with Leipzig and Leverkusen and Stuttgart, because it's exactly what they were talking about. And so, like, if you were aware of the risks, and of course, like, since then it's come out that Kiel wanted to sign Xhaka and Grimaldo, and all these guys were like offered to the club, and they said, no, we don't need them, and went a completely different direction. But it's just so interesting that sometimes these clubs go. I think clubs make a risk, like, they know the risks, right? And they make a calculated risk assessment, and they go into these situations with open eyes, and but it's a high gambling situation, and in this case it didn't work out. Like, they made a calculated risk assessment when it comes to Emre Can, and they said that, okay, well, we'll make him our captain based on the second half of the season that he played, and he played really well. So we're going to make him our captain, and therefore we're not going to just sign the midfielder, whether it's the Edson Alvarez or Xhaka, because that would hurt Emre Can, who's now not always playing anyways, right?
Yeah.
But these are the kind of what I'm going to try to say here is, the moment you're thinking you're making a calculated risk and you think you can go get high upside out of something, you're probably on the wrong path, right?
Yeah.
If this was a real business, would you make a decision based on that? No, you wouldn't, right? They did, right? They did, and they thought, okay, well, maybe it will go well, and it didn't.
It's also worth pointing out here that absolutely nobody was calling for Terzic to be sacked at the end of last season. He was a fan favourite. They came within a whisper of winning the league title. There was a kind of expectation that they would be able to build on that and mount another serious title challenge. And, there's obviously, I'm sure we probably pointed out at the time that, retaining Emre Can and assuming that he'd be able to do as well as he did without Jude Bellingham the following season was probably one of the things you mentioned there, where that was risky. But in the grand scheme of things, you can totally understand where, if Dortmund are sitting there with all the problems before them, Terzic probably wasn't one of the biggest ones, simply because of how they managed to turn that season around. What happens now is really what matters, though. They've obviously got to address what's happened this season, get to the root cause of it, and, as we've just been talking about, look 6 months down the line and think, well, if Alonso stays at Leverkusen, if Hoeneß stays at Stuttgart and keeps that team, if Leipzig bounce back under Marco Rose with these kind of new players, what do we have to offer? And they kind of almost have to look at, they almost have to plan for the worst and hope for the best, rather than plan for the best and hope the worst never comes, because that seems to be the way that they have kind of gone about this season, where they thought, we'll just kind of hope that it works out. But what they really need to do is be very thorough and say, if all these things line up, do we have a squad and a head coach that can compete with them? And what we've seen so far this season is they do not. I mean, if the season was to finish today and the new season was to start tomorrow, I'd probably predict Dortmund to finish 5th. That's probably where I am with this team right now. I know there's probably fans going to be sitting there saying, well, they're technically 4th right now. So, what are you talking about? But I just think the way that things are going, that's kind of how grave the situation may be.
And they still have to play Bayern at the beginning of next month. So, yeah. And Bayern look
and Leverkusen,
really,
if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but Leverkusen will have won the title by then.
Is there anything? They've also still got to play Stuttgart as well. They got to play Bayern, Stuttgart.
They need to worry about that.
And Leipzig. Yeah, things could be very tricky. So yeah, it's. I feel bad, because I feel like we always have these kind of big existential conversations about Dortmund after they win games, but I think Dortmund fans, they can let us know in the comments below what they think. Let us know if they think we're being too harsh or if they understand what we're saying. But it comes from a point of us trying to, we're not just trying to kick them while they're down. We're trying to obviously get to the problems here.
And I think they know, just like they knew last summer. I think they know this too. Maybe to end with a positive here, Dortmund, and I that might actually help them next summer, to be honest. They are qualified for that new FIFA World Cup format that in 2025, right? Leipzig's exit against Real Madrid confirmed that. They're Germany's second team. And I think there's a lot of money in that, if I'm not mistaken, because this is obviously Saudi financed. So wonder how Bundesliga fans feel about that when they find out that this is Saudi financed. But we'll get to that, I guess. Tournament will be in the United States. It replaces the old Confederations Cup, of course. But lots of money in that, and maybe Dortmund will use some of that money and sign Ian Maatsen.
Well, there's talk today that I was reading a thing, made me laugh. There's one of these kind of Twitter accounts that kind of aggregate all the news about Dortmund, and they were saying that there was a story from Bild saying that their big secret, which I put in quotation marks there, the secret plan is to sell Daniel Malin to Man United, and as part of the deal, retain Jadon Sancho, which I'm not entirely sure what's so secret about that, but...
Wasn't that the plan last winter?
Yeah, who knows?
That rumor isn't new. It's the dark days of the transfer window,
Mario, there's nothing new under the sun, especially when it comes to German football.
Oh my goodness, that's just hilarious. Like, trade rumors, this is not American football or the NHL or NBA. Trades almost never happen. All right, fine. Let's talk about Bayern. Let's quickly talk about Bayern. You know how that Bayern Munich have won a game decisively? We've gone from 700 messages in our Substack chat to just about 300. That means everyone in Bayern, the Bayern camp, is happy.
I thought you were going to reference my analysis that I made after the game. I don't know if you saw this. I put it on the social media platforms. Let me just pull it up quickly. I was like, Bayern's up and downs this season, perhaps best plotted by my new favourite metric XHKS, which is obviously expected Harry Kane selfies.
Yeah, I saw that. That's good.
If I'd love to know what Bayern fans think about this, because I've seen nothing but videos. I've seen his selfie alone after the game, of course, but so many video clips of the kind of the kind of hubbub and the kind of drama around him. Like, he's surrounded by cameras at full time, and he's going out of his way to pose with the ball for a selfie. And if someone who's not watched a single minute of German football this season saw that, they would think, oh yeah, Bayern must be walking to an League title. because he looks happy as Larry. But do you know what, though? The fascinating thing is that this Bayern team do genuinely look happy. They look very comfortable. They look like the pressure has been completely lifted from their shoulders. And all of a sudden, they're the Harlem Globetrotters. You know, they can do no wrong. They completely disposed of a Mainz side.
Against Mainz.
Yeah, of course. Well, they did it. They did it as
they were
well
good against
midweek.
Lazio too.
Yeah, exactly. You know, they looked like their old selves against Lazio. I mean, the fact that Goretzka scored 2 goals is just a baffling expression to me. The fact that a player who's been kind of diddling around, sitting around the 2 kind of central defenders for much of the season, and suddenly he's kind of stepped up because he's like, well, I might as well score some goals as well if we're all getting in on it. So we've kind of talked about this, the fascinating aspect. The thing that I find so fascinating about this is the kind of psychological aspect of this, where the head coach says he's moving on, and the club obviously say, you know, thanks, but you've done everything you can. And sometimes in those situations, I think depending on where you make these calls, it can obviously have a huge impact. And I think this actually worked out really well for Bayern, because if you sack a head coach, say at the end of the season or mid-season, and you bring a new head coach in, all that responsibility of the team's performances immediately goes from the previous head coach to the new head coach. But if you sack the head coach but keep him, which is what Bayern have done, all the responsibility goes to the players, because Tuchel's like, well, you can't sack me twice. You know, obviously they can remove him from the job, but clearly he's now playing the players that he wants. He's playing Dyer at centre back. He's playing Kimmich at right back. Thomas Muller's been reinstated as a number 10. Musiala's been shoved out left, which I know a lot of fans had some concerns over. But suddenly the players are all playing like, hey, we've got something to play for here, and they've got their own reputations to play for, and you know, it's obviously working. And we're now in this very bizarre situation where Bayern are now scoring goals for fun and are potentially playing themselves back into contention in the Champions League.
Yeah, I think it's probably too little, too late to win the Bundesliga title. I think if there was any hopes that Leverkusen could slip up the 90 minutes against Wolfsburg, buried that really quickly. I think after the 8-1 win, a lot of Bayern players were like, oh, maybe they're going to slip up. And then that was it was against 10 men, but it was the most dominant performance I have seen from a Bundesliga team since Pep Guardiola's Bayern Munich side. There was no doubt, even at 1-0. And I think psychologically, to bring this back to Bayern Munich, what we're talking about here, right? This must have been so deflating. It's like, oh, maybe we can catch them. And then you watch Leverkusen do what they did for 90 minutes. And you're like, no, this team is not dropping 10 points from here to the end of the season. It's just not happening. I'm sorry. I did the math, right? Even if Leverkusen go down to a 2-point average now until the rest of the year, which essentially is a win and a draw for every single, like if you win all your home games and draw your away games, that's essentially what turns out to be a 2-point average. They would still finish a point ahead of Bayern Munich if Bayern Munich win every single game from here on out. I'm sorry, Bayern fans. I don't think that's going to happen. Or it's very unlikely to happen. But it is fascinating to see how it turned this team completely around, how well they're playing. And you're absolutely right. They could win the Champions League. And, then the question then for me becomes, I actually think that the way it is now, there's so much talk about who's the best Bayern Munich coach. Oh my God, Bayern fans are going to hate me for this. It's probably Thomas Tuchel. It's probably this Thomas Tuchel is the best coach for Bayern Munich, right? This Thomas Tuchel who is no longer is shackled by the politics of the club because he doesn't care, because he's gone, he's liberated by the freedom of knowing that there's an end date to this. And I find this is so, what this reminds me of? It reminds me of Bayern's treble win in 2013, because Jupp Heynckes at this stage of the season knew that his time was over because Bayern Munich were going to sign Pep Guardiola, right? And then they went out and they absolutely obliterated everyone in the Champions League. I mean, literally obliterated them. What was the two-leg result against Barcelona? Was it 8-1, 8-2? You know, I think Mario Mandzukic scored. No, Gomez scored a hat-trick in the first game. Anyways, my point being, they were so good knowing that Heynckes was going to be gone, right? And Heynckes basically just, you know, of course he's a club legend and all that, and he's a good standing with Uli Hoeneß, but he kind of had this whatever attitude, you know, I'm going to show them that I am the best coach for this club. And I kind of sense the same thing could happen here. It's not going to result in the Meisterschaft, but Bayern win the Champions League at the end of the year. You know, I think everyone at the Sebener Straße is going to be quite happy. And on top of that, they might actually be happy because this is a year where the Bundesliga is negotiating a television contract and they can say like, hey, we won the Champions League. The Bundesliga has been more interesting than ever before because, you know, of all our shenanigans and Leverkusen being excellent. This is a great product. Give us more money.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It'd be almost like best case scenario in case, unless maybe something like Dortmund could even go on and do it, but that seems unlikely. Or we could have our Bayern Dortmund final. Wouldn't that be quite something?
It'd be hilarious.
I think I think it is honestly a fascinating kind of twist in this season. You know, I think we all expected Bayern to kind of just continue crumbling and crashing and burning, and you know, obviously we weren't all entirely surprised when we heard that Tuchel had agreed to move on. But you know, if there's anything that Thomas Tuchel is that he's obviously very emboldened, he believes in his own abilities as a head coach. He's proved multiple clubs, but most notably Chelsea, that he's very, very good at setting his teams up to win cup competitions against the odds, more so than ever. And that's basically what he's been giving carte blanche to do what he wants now with this Bayern team, which is why we're now seeing Eric Dyer in there, which I think personally is probably, you know, obviously people would think, well, why would he be playing Eric Dyer when he's got, you know, two 50 million euro central defenders sitting on the bench? But I think there's really something to be said for the way that he kind of plays alongside De Ligt. I think we've seen the best of De Ligt really since not only Dyer coming in, but obviously Kimmich played alongside him too. And the team just looks far more balanced. It looks far, far, far more balanced. And as you said, it's probably not enough for them to win the Bundesliga. It could help them actually step up a level and challenge in the Champions League. And it would be absolutely fascinating if Bayern were to finish this league season second, but obviously finish at a very strong high point where Kane potentially breaks Lewandowski's goal-scoring record. You know, Bayern go on this kind of winning streak between now and the end of the season. And then, of course, Bayern maybe get to semi-final or perhaps even a final and give, look, let's be honest, they're still Bayern Munich at the end of the day. It's not like them winning the Champions League would be like Mourinho's Porto winning it or something. But
their Bundesliga point total is actually not bad.
Yeah, and I mean,
it's better than last year.
Inter Milan got to the final last year, for goodness sake. So if they can do it, Bayern certainly can. But it would just be a fascinating kind of end to this kind of situation, and you know, it would, in a way, it would obviously help Tuchel a lot. It might make the next Bayern head coach's job a little difficult because he's stepping into some big shoes there. But yeah, and at the end of the day, it gives something for Bayern fans to be hopeful for. It gives them something to keep playing for. And, you know, even bringing it all back to Kane for a moment, I was doing some TV work and they were asking me about the way that Kane has been and how he looks like a happy player. And they said, you know, do you think he would, if he could, he would trade in all those goals to be first in the Bundesliga? And I said, yeah, maybe, but if I'm being perfectly honest with you, he's probably still smiling because his team are still in the Champions League. And that's what Harry Kane's here for. He's not, with all due respect, he's not here to win a Bundesliga title. Of course, once he does, everyone will say Harry Kane's finally won a trophy. But he hasn't moved to Bayern Munich for 100 million euros to win a league title. He's moved to Bayern Munich to compete for the Champions League. And I think he's probably all full of smiles right now because he thinks for the first time since he's arrived there, Thomas Tuchel's getting his team playing the way he wants it to play. And they finally look like the Bayern Munich side who usually compete for the Champions League.
I actually, also think the little bit of adversity that they're facing this year, and if they win the Bundesliga title next year, will actually make the Bundesliga title win for Harry Kane look better. Because all of a sudden, it's not them having won their 12th title in a row. It's them having to overcome a very strong Leverkusen side, because I suspect they will be still very strong next year. Or let's say, Leverkusen do it back-to-back, which is possible. They could, right? And they do it in the third year of his contract, and then it would be like, he's finally done it. And all of a sudden, like this easy Bundesliga title that was, he's just come here and he's going to walk to the Bundesliga title. The narrative of all of that is completely going to change. And I mean, I took this is a parallel that I had to Jürgen Klinsmann, right? When Jürgen Klinsmann joined Bayern Munich, because it was so similar to the Harry Kane transfer, of course, both from Tottenham, both these like mega stars. Klinsmann didn't win his title in the first year either. In fact, it was pretty much like this season. They did win in Europe. They won the UEFA Cup. So maybe that is the crazy parallel here, to continue these parallels that, I mean, the one difference is that Jürgen Klinsmann did arrive at Bayern Munich as a World Cup winner. So it's not like he has never won a title. But, it's an interesting parallel. And I think if let's say Bayern Munich take all 3 years of the Harry Kane contract to win the Bundesliga title, all of a sudden this Bundesliga title will feel special. You know what I'm trying to say here, right?
No, absolutely, yeah. And I mean, look, I still think at the end of the day, if he never wins the Bundesliga, but he gets a Champions League trophy for his troubles, then I think Harry Kane will retire a very happy
100%.
Man indeed. Yeah, I think he's going to have plenty of opportunities to win the Bundesliga before he inevitably returns to England.
Yeah, to break the Premier League goal scoring record. This has been fun. Really good show, Stefan. Enjoyed it. As I said, if you want to get involved into or send us questions about for episode 400, please do so. You can do so on the Substack. Sign up for that and open up the chat function there. And yeah, as always, this episode is brought to you by Bet Online. Any final thoughts before we wrap this up here?
I don't think so. Just to say that we'll obviously be doing the 400th episode, and that'll be coming out. But we'll also be doing a reaction show to the Bundesliga, to the Dortmund game, I would imagine, for subscribers. And so, yeah, please do consider subscribing if you can. You can also find us on YouTube as well if you prefer to watch us talk rather than just listen. And thanks to everyone who has started subscribing. We've started seeing those numbers tick up, so I do appreciate it. And also, actually, hello to people. We've actually had a lot of people start listening to the show through YouTube, so hello to all those people as well who probably had no idea who we were. So yes, hello to all those people as well.
There's a huge back catalogue of stuff. And of course, there's also a lot of episodes that we've done for the Substack that evergreens. Right, so go check that out. Like some historical stuff, so in-depth analysis, some explainers, etc. So if you're new and you want to find out more about the Bundesliga, we pretty much explain everything, including the crazy 50+1 rule. Matt DeFord and I have done a couple episodes on that. Who isn't here, by the way, today because he's in Munich, is at some beer garden drinking it up. I'm sure, Stefan. It's not fair. It's my hometown. I should be there. It should be the other way around. Anyhow, that's it for us this week. Today. We'll be back later this week. Until then, auf Wiedersehen.
Thank you for listening to Believe. You can show support to your host by subscribing to the show and giving us a 5-star rating on your preferred platform. Check us out at Believe.com and search for BLEAV on YouTube.
Our house is a mess. Come on in. I'm Amber Wallen, internet comedian, plant queen, and host of your new favorite podcast, Fly on the Wall.
Okay, that's pretty presumptuous to assume that this is going to be their favorite podcast, by the way. Like, come on, Amber.
Anyway, that wasp that you just heard interrupt me is my husband.
And co-host, Benjamin Wallen, also a comedian, and I host people at our home. I have a great wine collection in my cellar. Well,
you mean the mini fridge?
It's a mini
fridge. It's a mini fridge. New New episodes of Fly on the Wallin drop every Wednesday. Listen in as we discuss relationships, books, and keeping our sweet baby kid alive while we make laughs on the internet.
Subscribe to Fly on the Wallin wherever you get your podcasts.